Hey everybody. Tonight we're going to look at solutions to functions like the ones we saw in class today. To get started with that, let's take a look at an example similar to what we might have seen in class. Here we have a function y equals x squared minus x, and we have the domain that we're going to use for that function. In this case it's -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. So these are our possible input values. So when we make our table, just like we did in class, we're going to put in our input values, right? These are all going to be possible x values because they are the domain. And now we're going to find the range values using those inputs. So we can start with our first value, y equals -2 to the second power minus -2. Now whenever you substitute and you have an exponent on your variable that you're substituting for, especially if you have a negative number, you want to put that in parentheses. Super important, especially if you're going to work with a calculator. Now, when we calculate that, we get y equals -2 to the second power is 4, and we get 4 minus -2, which gives us 6. So y equals 6 to start. And we could do the same thing with -1. Y equals -1 squared minus -1. That gives us -1 times -1 is 1, minus -1 is 2. So that gives us 2 there. So you get the idea. We put 0 in. 0 to the second power is 0. 0 minus 0 is going to be 0. Then we have 1. 1 to the second power is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. Ooh, so we get 2 outputs of 0. And then 2, we put 2 in for x. 2 to the second power is 4. 4 minus 2 is 2. So we see a little symmetry there. 2, 0, 0, 2. So each one of these points that we just found, right, has an input and an output from this function. So if we know what the inputs we have that we're starting with, we can find all of the outputs. So each of these points here, -2, 6, -1, 2, 0, 0, 1, 0, and 2, 2, these are all part of this function, right? All of these points exist on the function that we started with. Okay? That's going to be super important to understand going forward today. Remember when we were solving equations and inequalities, we talked about the idea of a solution. Remember, a solution is a value that makes a mathematical statement true. So when we're solving equations for a variable, we're trying to solve for x. We're trying to find the value of x that makes the equation or the inequality true. Now, in some cases, statements can have a lot of different solutions. In some cases, they can have only one, and we've also seen statements that have no solutions. Here, though, instead of having an equation or an inequality with one variable, we actually have two variables. We have x and we have y in this first equation here. Y equals -5x plus 1. So when you talk about a solution in this sense, the solution, our value, is actually going to be an ordered pair, right? We think of this as a point or a value that has two coordinates. The x coordinate is -3, the y coordinate is 16. Now we can check and see if this is actually a solution to this equation by plugging in each number for the variable it represents. Now -3 is the x coordinate, 16 is the y coordinate. So we're going to substitute those values into this equation. We get 16 equals -5 times -3 plus 1. And we want to see if this is true. The left we have 16. On the right we have -5 times -3. That's 15 plus 1. And indeed we do have 16 equals 16 after we evaluate it. So this is a true equation, which means that -3, 16 is a solution to that equation. In example C here, let's try the same thing. We're going to plug in our value. In this case, we have y equals 5x squared. We know negative 1 is x. We know negative 5 is y because of the order of the ordered pair. Now we can plug in these values. We get negative 5 equals 5 times negative 1 to the second power. Now, remember, order of operations tells us we have to do the exponent before multiplication. So we have 5. Now, negative 1 squared, negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. And then we have 5 times 1, which equals 5. So in this case, because this value, negative 1, negative 5, makes this into a false equation, an equation that's not true, negative 1, negative 5 is not a solution. Okay? So remember, just like any equation or inequality, we can have values that are solutions that make it true, and we can have values that are not solutions, that when we substitute them, make the equation false. In our last example, we have 4 different points, and I want to know which of the following is a solution to the given equation. So in this case, we have our equation y equals x squared plus 2x, and we have 4 different points. Now it says circle all that apply, so we could have possibly more than one solution here. We're going to have to check. In our first point, we have negative 1, 3. Remember, for all of these, the first value is x, the second value is y. So I can rewrite my equation here as 3 equals negative 1 to the second power, make sure I use parentheses there, plus 2 times negative 1. So we evaluate, we have 3 equals negative 1 squared is 1, plus 2 times negative 1 is negative 2, and 1 plus negative 2 doesn't give us 3, gives us negative 1. So this is actually a false equation. So that is not a solution. That doesn't give us a solution to the answer that we want, or to the equation that we have. So now we try our next point, negative 2, 0. 0 is the y coordinate this time, equals negative 2 squared plus 2 times negative 2, and for both x's. 0 equals negative 2 squared is 4. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. 4 plus negative 4 is 0. So that's a true equation, actually. 0 does equal 0, so that's a solution to our equation. Let's try this next point we have, 0, 0. So now, in this case, 0 goes in for both y and x. 0 equals 0 squared plus 2 times 0. Now 0 squared is 0, 2 times 0 is 0, so we get 0 equals 0. This is another true equation. So we have 2 solutions so far here. Let's try that third one. Let's see if that's a solution too. Or that fourth one, I should say. 3, 12. 12 is my y. 3 is my x. Now I have 12 equals 3 squared is 9, plus 2 times 3 is 6. So this gives me 12 equals 15. Not a true equation, so this is not a solution. So in this problem, we only have 2 solutions. That's all our notes for tonight. Go ahead and submit your notes through Canvas, and I will see you all tomorrow.